Good afternoon. I'm Lydia Saylor, and I'm very lucky to be Jesse's goddaughter. As a very little kid, I got the sense that my godmother was a very important person. I gathered this from cues like the fact that we always frantically cleaned our house anytime she was coming for dinner, and that my parents would reverently and very frequently recount her stories and quotes. One of my family's favorite quotes from when I was about 1 year old, she told a baby me, "Whenever someone asks you what you want as a gift, you say, 'Diamonds and pearls.'" So I understood that she was important. But as a little kid, I simply loved Jessye because of her warm hugs and smiles, and especially because of the presents she gave me. And she gave me a lot of presents. Having two classical musicians for parents, I grew up going to a lot of concerts. Tagging along to these concerts as a kid sometimes felt like a bit of a chore. But when I entered my adolescence, I started to realize that these performances that Jessye was doing were actually really amazing. At the risk of blowing my sulking tween-age cover, though, I didn't admit this to my parents until much later. Then in college, I found myself studying classical voice and was rediscovering her discography through new, more educated eyes. My fellow music students and I gushed over how long Jessye could sing before taking a breath, her expressive swells, her emotion-filled diction. I pored over video recordings and giggled at her witty acting. I got goosebumps from her eerie portrayals of otherworldly characters. When I graduated, my dad and I went up to her apartment and I sang some songs and arias, and she coached me on them for about an hour. It was definitely nerve-wracking to sing pieces for Jessye that she had doubtless performed hundreds of times and knew so intimately. But it was a thrilling for me and my dad at the piano to experience firsthand what an attentive, generous, and gifted teacher she was. I'm still in disbelief that that really happened, and I'm unbelievably grateful. Jessye also gave me my first job out of college. Over the past year, I've been reviewing her papers to be sent to the Library of Congress. Only when I started unpacking these boxes full of history did the magnitude of her accomplishments start to dawn on me. I lost count of the number of honorary doctorates she received, how many prestigious awards, how many days of the year named for her in cities across the country. But some of the most joyful moments have been finding letters that I had written to her in little kid handwriting, or manuscripts of music my dad had arranged for her with pairing letters of utter admiration, or evidence of musical collaboration between Jessye and my late beloved godfather, Harry Huff. I've always been acutely aware that I didn't do anything to deserve Jessye as my godmother, but nevertheless, I've always been very proud. Thank you.
My late husband, Professor Derek Bell, and Jessye Norman were such great friends. To put it in context, he was the first tenured African-American professor at the Harvard Law School. And he and Jessye Norman shared that singular kind of accomplishment. Most of us are pretty good, but we're not the best in class. They were the best in class, and they had a special bond. And Derek actually understood all of the operas. I enjoyed them, but I did not really understand them. But they loved each other with a purity of friendship that it's hard to describe. One day I came home, And Derek, very proud of himself, had blown up a picture of himself and Jessye Norman to about 36 by 48 inches. And I said to him, I said, Derek, let me point out that that picture is bigger than all of the pictures of us in the apartment. And he looked at me incredulously and he said, but she's a goddess. And he went back to writing whatever great book he was writing. When he was sick and dying in the hospital 8 years ago, Jessye Norman flew in from the airport, came directly to the hospital. He'd been in a coma at that point for almost a week. And she sang to him for 45 minutes because she believed, as I believe, that sound is the last sense to go. The next night was the opening of Carnegie Hall, where she was on the board. She came by the hospital again. She sang to him for 15 minutes. He died about an hour later. They were friends for all seasons. When he did die, we had the memorial service. She sang at that service, and she sang a cappella, like they did in the old Southern churches, Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound. It was healing, magical, ethereal, celestial. You know, they also talked a lot about the struggle because they were whole people in the midst of struggle. They embraced beauty and culture and intelligence and embraced the fact that we had to fight for freedom every day. You know it. Jessye Norman, I think of her with great friendship. She and I were also close, but they were very, very close. And you know, it's one of those things what you see and you can just the joy of their relationship was palpable. The legend, the artist, a true friend. Rest in power. Thank you, the Norman family.
Good afternoon. Love to all of the Norman and Sturkey family. I first met Jessye Norman 20 years ago when I was commissioned to photograph her album cover, I Was Born in Love with You. It was a recording of Michel Legrand compositions. During that photo session, and in all of the others that followed, I was moved by a quality of beauty in front of my camera that I had never seen before. This beauty was not, as the song schooled us, only skin deep. It was a partner to a luminous, spirited, gorgeous soul. And whether the capture was quiet or joyful, Jessye's expressed emotion was always compelling, revealing honesty, self-honor, and omniscience. I was then and still grateful for the trust and her example. Jessye lived through a prism of excellence. She expected it, she delivered it, and she applauded it. She was truly our standard bearer of grace, ethics, and life's good works. She was driven and inspired by her dedication to the arts, the pursuit of justice, love and reverence for her family and tradition, her cherished student body at the School of the Arts in her name, and her forever home, Augusta. It is so good, and I'm privileged to be with all of you at her birthplace. Along with many of her friends here today, I spent every Easter Sunday with Jessye for church services. Is there anything better than singing hymns and really singing them out with Jessye next to you singing? I don't think so. And among those in the boys' choir were a few little ones who had been told, Miss Norman is in the first pew. And they would look over with one eye as they were singing for her approval, and she would give it to them. On that sanctuary wall, just in front of us, it was inscribed, "Grief is the price we pay for love." We have lost a righteous, genius, spectacular woman, and as Bruce Saylor said, a queen. So the grief feels immeasurable. How can it not? I will miss so much about Jessye, her one-of-a-kind friendship and generosity and guidance, her immaculate cooking, listening to music of Mary Lou Williams and Jerry Allen with her, and mostly our conversations about the madness in the world. She was a glorious big sister to me. Many of you know that Jessye often ended her public speeches with a quote that was important to her by George Bernard Shaw, and I'd like to recite it for you. It was Jesse's coda. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch, which I have got hold of for a short moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to the future generations. Jessye Norman's splendid torch was a profound one that enriched the whole wide world. We will now take up this torch, just as she asked us to do. Let it shine, and in Jessye's honor, do our best to abide by her perfectly designed prism of excellence. Let's do her proud.
to the Norman and the Sturkey family, on behalf of the entire city of Augusta, Georgia. I believe it is fitting and proper that the words to the students of the Jessye Norman School of the Arts, we represent something larger than ourselves. I believe that Miss Norman is the embodiment of what it is to be an Augustan. To be the city by the Savannah River, but to always represent something larger than ourselves. On yesterday, we had the occasion to dedicate a street in her honor. I'm reminded, Reverend Hill, that the number 8 is significant in biblical times. It means new beginnings. It denotes a new order or creation, man's true born-again event, when he or she is resurrected from the dead into eternal life. It is fitting today, on this great occasion of celebrating the life, the legacy, the loudness of her voice, and most importantly, a life that we have enjoyed the benefit of, from Jesse Owens to James Brown, but today from James Brown to Jessye Norman. A bright light was given to us on September the 15th, 1945. But now an even brighter light shines in the hearts and in the lives of countless generations of people across this globe, and most importantly, here in the city of Augusta. And so I close my remarks and my comments with a day of celebrating the life of Miss Jessye Norman. The city of Augusta hereby declares Saturday, October the 12th, as a day to celebrate the life of Miss Jessye Norman for her lifelong dedication and for the many contributions that she has made to her family, to her friends, and to the community through her outstanding musical career and humanitarianism for the purpose of improving the quality of life spiritually, mentally, and socially for citizens across this world. May her legacy of kindness, generosity, and love endure for years to come, as she shall forever live in your hearts and in our hearts. May we in the city of Augusta take this day and forever allow it to make us better because of the life of one Augusta daughter, the diva in her finest, Miss Jessye Norman. Thank you, and God bless you.
To God be the glory for all the things that he's done in my life, and I'm sure he's done as much in yours. It is an honor and a privilege to be here. Protocol has already been established, and I'd like to thank the family for this privilege on behalf of the state of Georgia and the House District 124, proud House District, where Jessye Norman grew up on Forest Street. I can remember my dad coming home and telling us about the tragic death of Mr. Norman, Mr. Silas Norman. As a young boy, I didn't know Mr. Norman, or I didn't know anyone in the Norman family to that for that, all of that matters. At that time, I didn't know Elaine. I didn't know anyone in the Norman family. But when I thought about it, it became real as to why did my dad, he didn't come home reminding us of someone that may have died in the neighborhood. That's not the way he operated. But for some reason, he came home to let us know about this. So when I thought about it, it became real to me as to why did my dad come home to tell us about Mr. Norman's death. And it's the fiber or the thread that bonded us, which was the love of music in our family and the Norman's family. See, my dad was a quartet singer, and he had a love for music through quartets. Many of you may have known him. So at the Howard's house, we had no choice but to listen to and love music and quartet singing. So when I think about it, thought about it even further, and I began to put it together, the Norman family was faced with the same thing. There's a mother and a grandmother that was pianists, a father that sang in the choir, and had sopranos in the house. So the windows and doors and crevices and nooks and crannies on Forest Street was not the same with the Norman family. Everybody on Forest Street, Chestnut Street, 12th Street, and Riceville Road all around Mount Calvary knew about the Norman family and their singing and how the voices of that family resonated throughout the community. Also, if you journeyed your way through A.R. Johnson or Lucy Craft Laney, you may have heard Miss Rosa Sanders tell the story of taking Jessye Norman up north to a competition where she placed third in the competition. And when you think about it, as she placed third, she began to make us understand and realize that third was not last. Because when she left that competition, she had a full scholarship at Howard University. And the rest was history. We are here today to celebrate that. The legacy of what she began. I can imagine that those other folk in the competition began to say, we're not going to let a little black girl from Georgia come up north and sing opera and out-sing us. And obviously, she made her footprint in that well. And so Northerners knew about Jessye Norman at that time. I want to do something that, I heard someone say earlier that they had traveled all over the world with Jessye Norman, but never came to Augusta. So I want to invite you and anyone else that feel comfortable doing this to take a ride about 2 miles from here to a street called Forest Street. And I would, in my sanctified imagination, as Reverend Hill would say it, I would imagine that when you travel that road, see that area, you would probably be reminded of what Nathaniel asked in John chapter 1 when he raised the question, can anything good come out of Nazareth?